yeah.
Stream live on YouTube.
It's funny because I just mentioned to you before we started that I'm in my childhood home at the moment, so it's quite interesting to kind of look back. And even more than that, I'm actually I've been going, because we're moving out of, well, my parents are moving out of my childhood home, and so we've been looking through letters and things that were and all sorts of memories and things that we're clearing out. And so it's been quite interesting, because just looking at some of the letters and things. So what I realized when I was doing that was how much kind of suffering I seemed to experience as a child, and what that kind of set up for me. So when I found some letters, for example, so my dad, when I was 4, my dad left, and he was kind of in and out of my life throughout my childhood, really. And I think what I realized in the letters was that it kind of taught me that if I'm going to be me, then I'm not lovable, if that makes sense. And so that kind of set me up with a whole load of beliefs about the world and how the world looked, that I wasn't enough, that there was, the world was a scary place. And so as a child, I didn't really have a lot of confidence. And I felt quite scared of the world. And I learned that I had to kind of control things, and for life to look a certain way, and all of that sort of thing. So I kind of wanted to walk through life with a plan. and so, yeah, so I just wasn't a very confident child, and I was quite shy, and it kind of impacted me. I thought it impacted me throughout my whole upbringing. So as a teenager, I was still really shy, and I wouldn't speak to people. And even in my 20s, I was still quite shy. And I also wanted to make sure that I had this stability, that life had to be stable. And eventually, when I was 17 as well, my dad bought me Slim Fast for my birthday, which is a bit of an unusual thing. So it really looked like everything, I then got an eating disorder because I had a lot of thinking about my eating habits. But it really looked like I was kind of helpless, and that I didn't have much choice, and that I had to just, live a certain way. And so then I got ill with chronic fatigue syndrome in my early 20s. And again, it was kind of back in that thinking of, I haven't got much hope. And then I became just exhausted by all of the thinking that I'd got going on. And so, yeah, my memories of that time are just not very happy, really. But I'd always kind of wanted deep down to go travel and to live in London, because that just seemed really exciting to me. But I had a lot of thinking that held me back, and I just thought that was never possible for me. So it didn't feel very free. It felt kind of very stuck, actually. And so, yeah, I was really, really, really scared. But eventually, even though I was really, really ill with chronic fatigue, and what that looked like was that I was, kind of trapped in the same 4 walls of my house, didn't really go out, or, I didn't have much energy, so I couldn't really do much. And I had sort of, homeopathy and things. So I was kind of on this beginnings of this journey into kind of figuring out who I was, and trying desperately to find freedom and not be stuck. And it was like there was this kind of little glimmer of hope that this wasn't really how life was meant to be. And so, yeah, it's like I kind of knew on some level that wasn't who I was, and that this can't be the truth. So I was really scared, and I remember going to counselling, and ended up being really offended, actually, because the counsellor that I spoke to kind of was like, well, you're not a victim, are you? And I was like, oh, but yes, I am. I am a victim, because, all of this has happened to me. But I wasn't very happy with that. But it did kind of make me think, well, actually, if she's saying this, what is there out there that is possible for me? So eventually I booked myself a ticket to Bali, of all places, on my own. So yeah, it was interesting, because then, of course, at first I was really, really excited. So I was experiencing like real excitement. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's going to be like the biggest adventure of my life. And I've been in these four walls for the last few years, and now I'm going to be free. So that was great until I booked the tickets. And then I booked the tickets. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? And so I was just experiencing then a whole load of, it was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to cope on my own? And when I'm ill as well, kind of going 18 hours across the world. And so, but I did it, and I kind of ignored the scary thinking that was going on, and I ended up in Bali. And when I was in Bali, what happened was I kind of felt like, oh, well, this is great, because I was doing a lot of meditation, and I thought, I'd found this kind of path that led me to see that there was something more, but I still didn't quite get it. But when I was there, I felt really peaceful. And I thought, oh, this is it. I found my peace. I found my inner peace. And then I came home, and it really looked like the freedom was only existing in the jungle, because that's where I'd felt the freedom. But when I got home, I fell back into thinking about the world in the same way that I thought about it before. And it felt like there was something missing. And I'd heard like that all we needed was within us. But it kind of didn't make sense, because I was like, well, if everything we need is within, then why do I now feel when I'm home like the only place freedom was back in the jungle in Bali? And so I kind of fell back into my anxiety, because I'd always been quite anxious and quite low with the chronic fatigue. But there was still a kind of renewed confidence that actually I did do this, so it's got to be possible. But there was something missing. And then eventually I came across the 3 principles, and that kind of filled in that missing link. And so just understanding how our thought creates our experience of life helped me to see so much in that, because I was like, oh, okay. So it wasn't even that the meditation was helping me. It was that when I was meditating, I thought I dropped out of I dropped out of my thinking, because I thought that I was okay. So that was quite profound for me, really. And I realized then that actually the freedom isn't just in the jungle, it's anywhere. And it's kind of seeing that our thoughts aren't necessarily true, and that they're not who we are. And that really helped. So it was really interesting. And it kind of just made sense of all of life, really. And as I made sense of all that, a lot of the fearful thinking and the anxiety and the thinking that I was trapped, it just all kind of dropped away by itself, and there wasn't really anything for me to do. It was just that I'd seen how it worked, really.
So that's an amazing story. It's lovely. And I was just completely stunned by so what made you book that ticket in the first place? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, well, it was funny, because I think it was actually the counsellor that I saw who called me a victim. I was like, I'm not a victim. That's not who I am. So it was like, it kind of uncovered this little glimmer in me that was like, no, who I am isn't a victim. So it's like there's this innate resilience, I guess, that we're always tapped into, that I kind of challenged. I was like, no, I'm not a victim. I'm going to book these tickets. It's typical of me. Tell me opposite. I'm just going to do what everybody tells me not to do.
Yes, but really interesting that you actually heard that wisdom, because the wisdom was stronger than all that chatter thinking.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, because even all that chatter thinking and all that rubbish thinking that was saying, oh, you can't do this and it'll be too difficult. And you said you just ignored it. That was brilliant.
Yeah.
That was even before understanding the principles. You just automatically listened to your wisdom, ignored all that rubbish chatter about being frightened, and just did it.
Yeah, and it's
just
shows that we don't really need to know anything. It's already within. And that's what I came to see, is that, you know, and I learned more even in Bali about like all these thoughts that are happening, and just kind of watching them and seeing them as they go on, and they just don't have any meaning really. Yeah. And I think that's where the freedom is. It's seeing that these thoughts aren't who we are.
So maybe you can say a little bit more about that, because most of the people that are listening won't understand quite what you're talking about. And although it seems obvious to you now,
yeah,
maybe you can say a little bit more about the thoughts and the feelings.
Well, it's funny actually, because I returned to Bali earlier this year for 4 months, and again on my own, but it had a very different feeling to it this time, because I I kind of knew a bit more about how life works. But yeah, I was doing a yin yoga training, and they were kind of explaining a lot of this stuff as well, and it was interesting how they explained it, and I kind of liked it, because we kind of think that everything, well, I didn't even realize that I thought really when I was younger. It was just life. But as I started to see more and more that, you know, when something would come up and I'd feel something in my chest, whether it was kind of like fear or whatever it was, wherever you feel it in your body, I started to see that that was then coming from a thought that I was having. And in the yin yoga particularly, we would sort of notice the link between the sensation in the body and the fact that that is coming from a thought, and that we can have all of these thoughts going on in our head, and they're kind of, what we want to do is kind of put a pause in between the thought and an action, and just start to see the thoughts and kind of see them out here, and just kind of observe them, and it becomes interesting, because like, well, okay, just because there's a thought in our head doesn't mean that it's real. And so I started to see that these thoughts were happening all of the time, and that's how our life experience was being created. So whatever we were thinking, we would feel. And so just because we're feeling something doesn't mean that that is necessarily coming from a true thought. And it's even the good stuff, like, you know, the good and the bad stuff it's all just thought energy kind of moving through us. And they describe that as kind of our emotions, our energy and motion, which I really liked. And I think the other thing I learned with that is that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just a thought, so therefore it doesn't matter, we can just ignore it. But what I really learned this time in Bali was that, yes, it's a thought and it's creating this feeling in our body or whatever, but we can just be with that feeling. And it's not pushing it away. So even though with the fear, I did just think, well, it's fear, I'm just going to ignore it. It doesn't have to be like that either. You can say, okay, well, I see you, fear, and I love you because you're going to teach me something. And you can hold yourself there and know that it's not who you really are, because who you really are is underneath all of that stuff. And by that, I guess I mean that we're all kind of part of something greater. And for me, I take from nature, because to me, nature's just living and it doesn't have any thinking, it's just happening. And we're part of that. We're working in exactly the same way. And yeah, what a better place to learn that, I guess, than in the jungle in Bali. yeah.
That's true, and at the same time, it's going on, you know, if somebody's not in the jungle, as you said, it's anywhere. Once you realize that, because I used to think that I had to be at the beach, that I had to be near the surf, and I had to be able to hear the surf, and I had to be there, and that was the only way I could really be happy. And if I was anywhere else, even if I was having a really great time and it was really lovely, I would be thinking to myself, no, I'm not really happy now because I'm not there.
Yeah.
Thinking that it had to be. And it wasn't that at all. And now, once I saw that was just thought and I didn't have to do anything about it, now I enjoy so much more. I enjoy the different, you know, the mountains and the woods and the trees and wherever I am.
Yeah.
And even in the towns, you know, it doesn't.
That's it. Yeah.
I was actually addicted to having to be at the beach or near the sea, and then it just disappeared without me doing anything. I didn't have to try to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's funny because also since I've been back, I've kind of not. I'm selling my home, and I haven't really got a permanent base at the moment, so I'm kind of floating around in different places, and I've been doing that for, well, since September, so quite a while. so it's really funny, because you think even that you need a home and four walls to be happy, and that's just not true. You know, you literally can find freedom anywhere, regardless of having a plan. And it's so interesting to see how different that is now to how I thought it needed to be when I was a child, because I longed for that stability. And it's really interesting.
It is, yes. I've been homeless in the same sort of way for maybe 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
and people keep saying to me, "Oh, you're so brave doing this," and I'm like, "What? No,
Yeah.
I'm just doing it. You know, I'm not
Yeah.
because I'm not thinking about it. I'm just doing it and enjoying where I am. And where are you going to be next? I have no idea."
Yeah, I know, and there's a magic in that. Really, it's amazing.
Yeah.
That's what I've come to see, is that you don't need to know, and actually when you don't know, you even think that's a bad thing, but when you don't know is kind of magical, because it opens up all sorts of fresh possibilities. And I think the other thing is that we want to think that we can know, but we can't really ever know, even when we're stable and we have got a place to be. Yeah, stable.
And you never know what's going to happen from one day to the next anyway. It's
Yeah.
And you seem a lot happier now that you don't have that stability or that wanting stability. Yeah, that's lovely.
Because you kind of don't know what's possible and what's going to open up. So when I was in Bali, I hadn't actually intended to stay in Bali. I'd intended, my plan was to travel around this time and go lots of different places. And I did do a bit of that. I went to Vietnam and Cambodia, but yeah, I kind of felt like I wanted to be in Bali. So there's still an element of, we have choice, and I felt drawn to Bali, and that was kind of like a wisdom speaking, I guess, that was where I quite wanted to be.
Well, that's interesting though, that you were talking about being drawn to it and listening to that, rather than you were going there, but you were staying there because you were scared of going somewhere else. That's a difference between.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's and I think that comes back to kind of just listening to the wisdom, our own wisdom.
And then you said that you came across the three principles. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I was training as a homeopath in London. So I did eventually also end up in London, which I'd wanted to do. And I met a lady called Mandy Spray, who is really lovely. And so she just, she shared it with me, and I had mentoring with her, and it's just been kind of a journey from there, really. And it's just amazing.
And what was the first thing that impacted you? What was the first thing that you noticed or came across, that you understood when you came across the principles? What did that?
Yeah, it was amazing, actually, because I had been working as well in I'd got my own business. It was I used to do holistic therapies, and I was struggling with when clients would say cancel, like on the last minute, or not turn up, and I had been speaking to her about that, because that was me wanting to control it, and it needed, it needed to be just as it was meant to be. And so I'd spoken to her about that, and I remember I'd had this conversation with her, and I thought, oh, I really wish I'd written all of that down, because I'm going to forget it all. and I didn't write it down. And then the next day I woke up and I had 3 clients cancel in the afternoon, which was really unusual. And I thought, instead of my usual thinking about, oh, how could they do that, and all of this, I suddenly went, oh, that's really interesting. I've got the whole afternoon free. I could go and have a coffee. And I thought, oh, what happened there, Nicole? That's really strange. So I found myself in this cafe, and I had been to a meditation a couple of weeks prior to that, and we'd done, it was like a mindfulness thing, and we'd got leaves from outdoors, and we kind of closed our eyes and rub them around our face to just bring us into the present moment. And I remember I was journaling in this cafe, because I love to write. I'm a writer as well. And I was sitting there journaling with my coffee outside in the sunshine. It was beautiful sunshine. And I'd got Mandy's post-it note on my little book that I was writing in. And all of a sudden, this tiny little leaf just came floating down in front of me and just plopped onto her post-it note. And I thought, so I was like, I've got to follow that. So I just did, yeah. And it was amazing because I just had so many insights about, it was just the missing link, basically, as Sid Banks says, it's that one thing that kind of explained kind of stuff that we already know, but it just really helped me to kind of understand it. Yeah.
Because it seems obvious. It seems obvious once you do know it, doesn't it? But when you said, but then you said you look back to your childhood and you didn't even notice that thought was even there, really.
I didn't know I was thinking about all of this stuff, and it was exhausting.
So what are you doing? What are you doing now?
Yes. So when I was in Bali, this is where I was coming to the fact that we kind of don't really know what's ever going to happen. So as I was in, because I ended up in Bali, I had kind of made some friends with people who owned a retreat centre. And so I thought, well, actually, I've always kind of wanted to do a retreat. So that kind of just unfolded whilst I was there. And again, it's nothing I could have planned for. It just kind of happened. So now I'm planning that for next year to help explain, a bit about the principles and how life works. And I'm doing events as well in and around the UK. So yeah, and then planning some UK retreats. So it's all kind of busy, and I'm kind of writing a book as well about it to help explain, I guess my understanding of it, because everybody's got a different experience. But
So that's absolutely right. And for people who are listening who haven't heard about the principles before, or the understanding, or anything to do, and it may not be making sense to them.
No.
In exactly the same way that when you were talking to Mandy, it wasn't making sense to you,
Yes.
and yet something was taking it in. Something was taking it in, and things changed. And that's what most people find, is that it doesn't really make sense on a logical level to start with.
No.
Which is good, because that's not where you need it to be. You don't need it to be in that part. But the more, even people might find that just watching this and thinking, oh, I don't know what that was about, or that afterwards things might just change, and they'll think, oh, how did that happen? Or why did that happen?
Yeah. And try and work it out. And again, we don't need to do that. But one of the things that I found quite interesting was, because before all of this, I had been massively into self-help. And so I'd kind of explored every option possible, and I'd trained in every modality you could possibly train in. I was an aromatherapist, a reflexologist, everything. And so I'd been, big into Louise Hay and affirmations. And so I kind of thought that I was always looking outside to fix myself. And when I came across this understanding, I realized that there's nothing to do. We don't even need that. It's just, particularly with affirmations, I think it's like almost affirmations is forcing us to be positive, instead of allowing us to just see that it's all just thought, and actually the affirmations are the truth. It's not that we have to force ourselves to sit in front of the mirror and think, I am whole, I am, all of this stuff. It might be helpful, but it's helpful because you believe it only. So I used to sit in front of the mirror with when I was younger and be like, I am beautiful, I am confident, I am this, and then I used to just feel like a failure for the affirmations, because I didn't believe them. I was like, I'm even a failure at these, because it was all just thought. And actually, if we can see that is just the truth of who we are, that's more helpful, I think.
And what's happened to your chronic fatigue?
Yeah, so eventually, because I dropped out of my thinking, I did get better, and it just shows you that the thinking was just so exhausting. And it's not that we stopped thinking; it's just that the stuff that we believed that was keeping us held in the thinking about it kind of just drops away.
And also, if you were doing lots of positive thinking and trying to force yourself to do extra thinking. That I know I did that for years, and that is exhausting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So did you just notice that your fatigue had gone, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been recovering before I went to, when I went to Bali the first time. I think a lot of the space that I had whilst I was in Bali to meditate and things like that did help me to, obviously, I did drop out of my thinking whilst I was in Bali a little bit. So that helped, and obviously just taking space really, to just find out a bit more about who I really was. And
it's interesting. I was talking to John on one of these sessions the other day. I was talking to John El Mokadem. Have you?
Yeah.
And although we were not talking about that specifically, because of something that came up, he did explain how the physical, how thinking and how that physically works. It's not just about, oh, my thoughts went away and so I got better. There is a physical process, and he explained all of that very quickly, actually. He says he's never explained it so quickly before. But that is on the video where I was talking to him. So if anybody's interested in how that actually works physically, and it does make sense, then listen to that one as well. No,
that sounds good.
But that's great.
So it was still a gradual process over time, but I can definitely see the link between being in my thinking and feeling exhausted.
So do your workshops and not workshops, still events that you're doing, do they have a particular topic, or are they just around whatever?
Yeah, I'm actually, because I'm working on my book at the moment, they're going to be kind of based on those different things. So I'm going to be theming them but I think it's going to largely be around kind of stuff that I've experienced, because I just want to be able to help people that are obviously, from what I can see. It's just helped me.
That's really great, though, because there are so many young people who go through exactly the same experience or very similar experience to what you've spoken about. And even a lot of the people that I've spoken to on this series, who are now very successful and doing very well and enjoying life and so on, when you look back, they had childhoods where they were feeling really bad about themselves and thinking that they weren't good enough and being told they weren't good enough at school and all sorts of things like that. So that's really wonderful that you're doing that with people to help them to understand that they are okay, actually.
Yeah, that's it. And it is seeing that underneath everything, we're always okay. And even that tiny glimmer of resilience that I saw, even though I didn't know what was happening, was amazing, because it was in there.
That's the other thing that I really love about it as well, is that the right person turns up at the right time. And even though you thought that counsellor wasn't good and wasn't for you and so on, she just gave you that exactly what you needed in that moment. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, exactly. And you can't plan for that. It was really interesting learning that we really can't plan how life's going to be, and actually, why would we want to?
No, it's much more fun more fun when you don't know what's going to happen. Much more opportunities. You don't realize what's possible, do you?
No, that's it. And if we can only see the world as through one way, then it just closes us off to so much.
So just in case anyone wants to ask any questions that's here, you can type into the chat box, or you can put your hand up and we can invite you on and you can speak if you'd like to, or you can just keep quiet in the background there. So nobody's showing any signs of asking any questions, but okay.
But what was interesting as well, as I was looking through the letters, was that I started to feel quite sad, and I was like, oh, that's really sad looking at those letters. And but even that, I realized that that was just going to move through and that it was okay to be there. And I think that's the other thing, is it's not being afraid of our experience, even when there is sadness. Because actually the sadness teaches us as well. So even the bad stuff that we perceive to be bad is teaching us that, you know, a lesson about something. And I just looked at the letters and thought, wow, how much I've learned since those days.
Yeah, that's right. Even, and if we can just enjoy every feeling, it's so much easier, isn't it? So much more fun. That's the whole point of, it's like going to the cinema and enjoying every experience you have.
Yeah.
Only it's happening every day and you're not paying for it.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, learn more about your new book, have you got a title for it yet?
I think it's going to be something along the lines of truth and how to find freedom from suffering. Yeah, and I do. Because I'm a writer, I also write on my blog. So I have my blog, so that's all on my website as well. So there's lots of different insights that I've had that I've just shared, and I also write poetry, so I share all that on Instagram.
Thank you very much for being here. It's been lovely. Thanks. See you again soon.
Yes, thanks, Sam.